So welcome everyone to this global WWF webinar. And today we are going to talk about how to align your city's target with a climate resilient future. And specifically, we are going to learn about how to use the OPCC 1.5 degrees Celsius alignment method. My name is Sabina Andrén, and I'm a program manager of the WWF One Planet City Challenge Global Coordination Team. And me and my colleagues are very happy to see all of you here. And actually, we have over 280 participants registered for these two sessions from more than 30 countries. So this is fantastic, and we are looking forward to an interesting session. So today we are going to focus both the why and the how. So why is it so important and valuable for you as a city to work with this topic? And how can you learn from and use the OPCC 1.5 alignment method? We will have speakers and we will have a Q&A session in the end where you can put questions and comments in the chat, and we'll try to bring them up in this Q&A part. If we don't have time for all questions, we can reply to you afterwards, and you are most welcome to contact us, of course. We will also send out a recording and a tutorial with the content of this webinar after. But first, a bit more about the context, and you can go to next slide. So you are now at a webinar from the WWF, where we present the One Planet City Challenge. We know that cities have the power to drive transformative change, but navigating the path toward a climate resilient future can be complex. And by joining the One Planet City Challenge, your city will receive strategic feedback and support as you progress along your individual climate journey. So this is part of starting up the new OPCC 2025 to 26, and we welcome you to join us. There will be more information about this later on, but now I'm happy to have a WWF welcome message with Carina Borgström Hansson, who is our Senior Advisor and Group Manager from the WWF Cities. Welcome, Carina, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sabina, and a good morning, afternoon, evening to you, everyone. A very warm welcome to this important webinar. It's so energizing to see so many of you here today, because this demonstrates that the global movement to combat climate change continues and is growing from the bottom up. We all know that the stakes are high, with the climate crisis accelerating. Cities, as you also know, are at the heart of both the problem and the solution, and there is hope and power in collective action. Every policy you will implement, every climate action plan you will improve and implement will bring us closer to the Paris Agreement goal, and it will help us shape a safer and healthier and more equitable future. That's why today's conversation is so important. And it's not only about raising ambition, it's about how we do it. So we need to listen to science, and the way forward is ambitious and integrated climate action plans that cut emissions at speed while also building resilience to climate change. And ambitious targets must be matched by integrity. Trust is built through transparency, by setting clear goals and sharing progress honestly, and engaging local stakeholders as partners, not just audiences. And this kind of open, science-based planning earns the support of communities, and it will unlock stronger collaboration from civil society to the private sector, and yes, sooner or later to the national and international community again. This webinar is more than an information session. It's actually a chance to join a growing community of cities that are committed to just and science-based climate action. Your work matters and your leadership is noticed. And we at WWF, we're really proud to stand with you in this effort, because together we can drive the transformation that the world and all of our cities so urgently need. So with that, let's get started, and welcome and thank you once more for joining the One Planet City Challenge.
Thank you, Karina. Very good to hear from you, and thank you for this welcome message. So we are continuing then, and I am proud to welcome our speakers at today's webinar. We have Björn Sigurdsson, who is a senior climate strategist and independent advisor with international experience coaching cities on climate targets aligned with the Paris Agreement, and with more than 20 years of work experience in Sweden in the cities of Uppsala and Stockholm. And also a warm welcome to Saskia Tegnell, my colleague at WWF Cities, expert in climate, sustainable energy and urban development, and with work experiences on city climate action in Europe, for example, in the Netherlands. Welcome to you as well. And Saskia, we would very much like to hear you set the scene for the topic of this webinar. Why are we here? Saskia, over to you.
Thank you, Sabina, and thank you all for being here today. I will start before letting Björn tell you more about how to set targets, just to pause a little bit by letting us all have the same idea about why this is important. And we talk about the importance of net zero and urgent action. And if you go to the next, Björn, immediate and deep reductions for all greenhouse gases is needed. And in 2024, we saw the annual global increase of temperature reaching 1.5 degrees for the first time since before the Industrial Revolution. And this is on average over time, and this is how we measure it for the Paris Agreement, already at 1.3 degrees of warming, heading to 3 degrees of warming by the end of the century. And these are all numbers, and it might be hard to grasp, but what we're already seeing, and this is also something Karina mentioned in her welcome message, the consequences are already severe. We're seeing this all over the world, and this underscores the urgent need for action. We know that 1.5 is a threshold, and it continues to be an important threshold for us to not get into too severe consequences, but we also know that science says that every 10th of a degree of warming that is avoided will make a significant difference. So just strengthening what was said earlier, it's very good to see you all here today, and having that at the back of our heads that every cutting of emissions will make a difference. Next. And we talk here about scale and urgency. So first, the scale. So how much and how deep do these reductions actually need to be? Well, we know that net zero greenhouse gas emissions must be reached as soon as possible. Well, this is something we can all agree on, but net zero should be pursued or reached by 2050 at the latest on a global level. And therefore, fossil fuels need to be phased out. So these are two parts of the scaling. But it also matters a lot on how fast we cut these emissions. The sooner climate action is pursued, the more likely we will succeed. Like I said, every 10th of a degree of warming is important. Every ton of CO2 or greenhouse gas emissions that is being emitted is important. So early action is also of the essence. And that's why we say, well, at least one interim target by 2030 is important, not only the net zero by 2050, and preferably every 5 years thereafter, to really get us not only reaching for that end goal, but really trying to cut as fast as possible. And luckily, these years and these numbers do not come just out of thin air. There are experts and scientists working on this every day. And also, we are not alone when it comes to what this means for cities. And if we go to the next slide, what we are really trying to do here today, and it's might be good to pinpoint that, following the message from Karina, that we really need to listen to science. What we really try to do here today, but also in the One Planet City Challenge, is having recommendations that make these global guidelines tangible locally. And we have some, in the last couple of years, we've had some reports coming out that really guide cities in this by making recommendations for you. And we had the Integrity Matters report in 2022 from the UN General Secretary High-Level Expert Group. Following that, we had in 23 recommendations that were made specifically for cities on how to cut greenhouse gas emissions and in how to do that in the best way. Following that, in end of last year, the draft came out for target setting, and this is still in draft but coming to a close, I think, now. So I recommend you to take a look at these documents, absolutely, because they're a good basis, but also to know that what we're talking about at today at the webinar, at this method that Björn is going to talk about, are all based on these guidelines, really trying to make them tangible for you in your local climate action work. And if we go to the next slide, we as WWF, we play an active role in making these global guidelines, but also, as I said, taking them into account when we are working with the tools that we give to you. And before letting Björn talk more about how to set the targets in line with the Paris Agreement and really creating this climate resilient future, I just want to you to have in the back of your head that the level of ambition that we are talking about here today really depends on local realities. And as Sabina said in the beginning, we have cities in this webinar from all around the world with different sizes, different challenges, different opportunities. And this, of course, should also be something that you take with you when you're working with your target setting. And going to the next, what we try to say with the method that we're talking about today, the OPCC One Planet City Challenge 1.5 alignment method, target setting, is to ensure that you can take local leadership, but also ensuring a minimum global standard. So where do we all need to be at to make sure that we're cutting emissions in the right scale and in the right pace, but also being able to do more than that? Because we have heard, and you all know, cities are important to secure global climate actions, and therefore ambitions can and will often be, as we've seen in many of your cities, the ambitions can be higher to respond to urgency, because you see that the consequences of climate change are already affecting your city. It can be to seize local benefits, that you see that it is possible to have higher target setting because of a specific private partner or a specific sector where you can cut faster. It can be leading by example that drives you as a city to really go faster. And this is something that we see now across the world when nations are not stepping up to the global challenge, at least not everywhere. We see cities really wanting to lead by example, and we really encourage you to continue doing that. And lastly, it can also be aligning with national or regional policy. We see in the EU at the moment, lots of cities setting targets to be net zero by 2030 already, because they're a part of a program, because they're part of a movement in the EU, really saying we want to be there at the forefront. So that is my last message to you before going into Björn's tutorial about how to set targets. Really think about that when you're working with your target setting and with your climate action plans. What is your local context? How can we contribute in the way that we are able to? Thank you.
Thank you, Saskia. Wonderful. This was a very important and encouraging message, underlining cities' importance and impact in the climate work. So now we are moving directly into the main session where Björn Sigurdsson is going to guide us about the OPCC 1.5 alignment method. Over to you, Björn.
Thank you very much, Sabina, and thank you for inviting me here. I'm really happy and glad to be here today and present for you and be part of and supporting this important movement of cities worldwide that tackles the climate change challenge. And so my presentation will be about what is the OPCC alignment method really, and go into detail. And I will walk you through the method. First, we give you the overall framework, build upon what Saskia has laid the foundation, and Karina. And the aim is to explain specifically the target setting requirement for the year 2030, the interim target, so that you yourself can calculate a fair share mitigation target for your city. So that is the purpose of this piece of the webinar. All right. So the basis or starting point for climate action, I would say, by any city is to have a climate mitigation target to guide you. And then, of course, to adopt effective action plans. The IPCC 1.5 degree report from 2018 points to the necessity to cut emissions in half every decade, something that also come to be known as the global carbon law. By phasing out fossil fuels, enhancing the ecosystem, and implementing actions that brings well-being to the people, we will succeed to comply with the carbon law. And that is illustrated to the right in the slide here. It is, of course, very important that the mitigation target has high level of integrity. So therefore, any reduction target should be science-driven, equitable, and complete. Science-driven means that the commitments are led by the latest climate science. Equitable means that commitments account for the different historical contributions to levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and as well socioeconomic development of different countries and cities. Finally, complete means that the commitment should cover all greenhouse gases emissions from all major sources of emissions within the scope of the city. So, with these guidings and in line with this, the OPCC alignment method requires cities to have a net zero target by 2050, the latest, and to have a fair midterm or near-term target by 2030. So let's have a closer look at these two target requirements for 2050, 2030. So by 2050, by the latest, reduce total greenhouse gas emissions to net zero. And that is, so this specification of the target for 2050 is, among other things, pointing to that it is the total greenhouse gas emissions that need to be reduced to net zero. That is, it's not only carbon dioxide, but also methane, laughing gas or nitrous oxide, and all the different man-made F gases, fluorinated gases that we need to tackle as much as we can. And again, on top of this, very important that it includes the fossil fuel to a minimum in order to have a trustworthy target. Let's go to the 2030 target. The starting point for the 2030 target is the necessity to cut global emissions in half. or with 50% every decade. The OPC alignment method and the carbon law of halving emissions every decade uses the year 2018 as a baseline. On top of these 50%, the method introduces a fair factor to cater for the different responsibilities and capabilities of countries and cities, the equitable factor. In clear text, that is, more resourceful cities will take on higher cuts, but all cities are invited to act. I think that is important. And when this is calculated, there will be a span between resourceful cities, a maximum of 65% cut per decade, and then going down to 25% below us to be cut between 2018 and 2030. The target and the baseline need to be complete. That is, the emissions baselines inventory and the target should include both Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions and all gases. And therefore, we recommend, and WWF recommend, estimating baseline emissions using the Global Protocol for Community Scale Greenhouse Gas Emissions Inventory. That is the international standard. So now we have the a little bit more details on these two target requirements. Let's go and see what is this fair factor and how is the calculation actually being done for 2030 using the OPCC method for alignment. It's quite simple, actually. Trust me. To calculate the 2030 target, you only need 4 data points and you only need to do 3 calculation steps. So first, work with your emission baseline for the year 2018. Or if you don't have an emission inventory for 2018, take a nearby year and try to adjust it to work as a proxy for 2018. Then you need your population numbers for 2018 and the prognosis for 2030. The fourth point is a national fair factor. This is where the equitable factor comes in. I will tell you more about that soon. Just let me present you the 3 calculation steps. Step A, divide your 2008 emissions with your population for the same year. So you will get emissions per capita, multiply it with a fair factor, and the last step, multiply the result with your population prognosis for 2030, and then there you have your city's fair share mitigation target 2030. I will go through this once again, but first, I'd like to introduce and tell you the background about the fair factor and how actually to find your fair factor, which is important in this equation and calculation. The alignment method of OPCC uses the Human Development Index to find the fairness or a fair share, equitable factor. The fact is that the Paris Agreement itself do include this global fairness aspect between countries, but it doesn't state how to implement it or what it is exactly. So therefore, OPCC and WWF has developed a method to do this. To complement the Paris Agreement, actually. The method is simple and transparent, and I will show you how to calculate this. The method uses the Human Development Index. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but this is an index compiled by the United Nations Development Program. The index reflects human development per country and considering key elements of human life. That is healthy life, education, and standard of living. So there are several components giving you this index between 0 and 1. The index is the basis to calculate the OPCC country fare factor. And I will show you now how to do this. You have the link in the slide, and there will be a tutorial PDF and tutorial material available at the OPCC web page, where you can find all the links and so on. So the national fare factor, how it's being done. It uses the same year as the emissions baseline year, then of course. And you need to go to the website of the UN Development Program and their Human Development Reports website. There you will find the index, and the historic overview here of the index is shown in the slide. So find the same historic overview and search for your country's Human Development Index value for 2018. So when you have found your value, the global average is 0.7-ish. Here I give you an example of what I did for Sweden and Swedish cities. I found out that the HA Human Development Index value for Sweden is 0.9 and a little bit more. I divided with the global average of 1.7. I get a quota to 1.28, and I multiply this with 50%. And that is to relate the factor to the global need of 50% cut of emissions every decade. In the case of Sweden, we ended up with a fare factor of 64%. Here's some example of other countries' adjustment factor or fare factor. And as you can see, as we said before, between 25 and 65% adjustment, depending on where your city is located in what. Okay, we have the fare factor. Let's go back to the calculation in detail. So here is the data input again. The emission baseline 2018 in tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, that is all greenhouse gases, all major sources and sectors. The population for 2018-2030, and the fare factor now that you have for your national, for your country. So with this, you do 3 steps. You remember 3 steps: A, B, and C. First step, take emission baseline, divide it with the population, and you will get emissions per capita 2018. This is your baseline. Step B. So you use the result from step A, that is the per capita emissions, multiply it with the national fare factor, the one that I just show you how to calculate. And you will get the emission reduction fare target 2030 expressed in carbon dioxide equivalent or greenhouse gases on per capita. Final step, multiply the above, the fare target 2030 per capita, multiply it with your population prognosis in 2030. So that you get your emissions reduction target expressed in absolute ton of carbon dioxide emissions or equivalent greenhouse gases, because we want to work with absolute tons. Per capita is for the calculation, and per capita is good for comparison and having a look on how you do compared with other cities. but when it comes to action and the need to how much we need to cut, we need to work with absolute numbers. Okay, only 3 steps, and you have an indication for a minimum fair share mitigation target for your city. I have done an example calculation, and I took a county. It works for counties, it works for cities, regions, states. I took the one of the counties in Sweden and did the emission inventory for 2018, and here you will find the steps and how I have done the calculation. And here also I give you in step C, I give you an additional step if you like to work with the target expressed in percentage. Then you give you the calculation here to transform absolute tons to also absolute percentage, so to speak. This in the tutorial there will be this, and there will also be a template for you to work with your own target and your own city. So I think that the OPCC alignment method and I would say it's easy to calculate and it's easy to understand and it's transparent, and all this makes it easy for anyone to work with, and also to communicate to the layman or communicate to your executive, your political leadership. And besides having this clear fairness adjustment and aligned with science for the 2030 target, it invites all cities to act. I think that is very beneficial to all people's health and future. So with this, working with the method, I think it will give your city's climate target a high integrity factor. And right, I think it's important also to say that this works for any kind of city. So it's small city or a large city or a rural city or municipal, so to speak, and so on. Any kind of city can work with this. So what now? What shall you do? Well, try to calculate your cities with a method for you, for yourself and for your cities. And if you don't have a target, check whether it meets the OPCC benchmark target requirement for 2030, 2050. Or maybe you even outperform them. If your city's target does not meet the benchmark, you might consider to use the method to advocate a political decision to sharpen the target. Then it might be the case that you don't have a target. Well, then you're welcome to use the method to formulate a integrated and fair share mitigation target. And welcome to participating in the OPCC. There you will receive a strategic feedback report, which includes a target verification. And I will show you briefly how it looks like. Here to the left, you can see the front page of such a feedback report. And to the right, there is a visualization of the verification of your climate target. And it's you can see the scale here, ton per capita and the years, and the city target that has this city reported is shown by the dots and the line in the graph, and the OPCC benchmark target requirements are shown by these two diamonds. In this case, the feedback indicates that the 2030 target is not fully in line with the fair share midterm target, and also the 2050 target could be a little bit sharpened. So the city in question could benefit from a review and a sharpening of the target in summing up. All right, my last picture, my last slide. The OPCC, as I see it, has a clear emphasis on big win actions for the alignment with the Paris Agreement. But setting targets is, of course, not enough. It is the strong start. Strong targets need to be followed by strong action. This is the most important thing. And to guide you, just quickly show you, Saskia introduced the reports, the guidelines from Integrity Matters reports, and they have some guiding principles that I recommend you to study and maybe try to apply. The principle 1 and 2 emphasize urgency and integrity. Principle 3 and 4 emphasize transparency and credibility by openly publish all your work. And principle 5 emphasizes equity, also in the climate actions, of course, not only in the targets. This needs to be followed. And so I stop here. I hope that you, by this tutorial, has got a clear understanding of both the why and the how of the WWF OPCC 1.5 mitigation target alignment method with the Paris Agreement. Good luck and thank you.
Super, Björn, and thank you very much. And please stay here in for the Q&A session. But this was a very pedagogical and insightful presentation. Thank you both, Saskia and Björn. So we already have some questions. Maybe you can go to next slide. Just to say that now we are moving into the panel and Q&A session where we can ask questions to both Saskia, Björn, and we have a lot of experts here in the room, I am sure. Maybe I put the first question. So to Björn, if you are a beginner city, like in the start of your journey, what do you think is a good first step in the process to develop a target aligned to the Paris Agreement? Where should you start as a beginner?
All right, thank you, Sabina. I think that it's actually start with the final, the end target, the 2050, the net zero target, so that that you take a clear commitment to the net zero, where we all need to go by the latest 2050, preferably earlier. And when you have that, you can start working backwards to and set these interim targets that will show you that you are serious about cutting the emissions as soon as possible, and that you are on the way towards the net zero target. So start with the net zero target commitment, and then add on as you have time and resources.
Good tips. Thank you. Saskia, maybe you can check the chat if there are questions I have seen.
Yes, we have a question from Matt from the city of Saskatoon, and he asks, can the 2030 interim target be calculated based on another year than 2018? And following up with, if the answer is yes, if you can use another baseline year, how do you do that, and how do you use the HDI values? This has come up before. Björn, maybe you can help us.
Yes, of course. The method is calculated, is made with the 2018 as a baseline, as the base. And we would really recommend you to use that. In some cases, you don't have the 2018 as a baseline. You don't have an emission inventory for that year. So what can you do then? Well, if you have other baseline years, maybe 2015, 2022, then try to make an intelligent estimate what could be a rough picture of your emissions in 2018, or find ways to see what could your emissions be in 2018.
Good. Just use the chat if you would like more clarification. Saskia, there is also a question about HDI, right? Maybe we should mention a bit about country level and sub-national data.
There is a question from Genevieve Martinez, if there is a default fare factor for different countries. And this is what you showed. You showed the example for Sweden, but maybe we can mention a little bit more about how to think around that.
Yes. There is actually no list with all the countries and from the WWF, but in at the UN Development Program site for the Human Development Index, all countries are included for the 2018 year, and you will find your country there. So find your value for your country and divide it with the average factor value for the word, and you will get your fare factor in the way that I showed you the calculation. Was there additional question to that?
Maybe just mentioning the option for some regions at least to use sub-national data as well, even though that is not common everywhere. But could you say something?
Yes, there are some subnational Human Development Index values. I have learned from others that the difference is in the end not that large or big, maybe typically between up to at most 5%. So the national HDI would give you a good enough figure for your fare factor. Of course, you can always decide yourself that, well, our city is very wealthy in comparison to other parts of the country, and we would therefore like to take on another higher ambition. That could be one case, for example. Of course, that is you're all free to work. This is an indication, a guideline, and you need to, of course, adapt it to your local circumstances.
Yes, thank you, Björn. Now we have a question in Spanish here from Matias Montero. Uri, would you like to help?
Yes, of course. He doesn't have clear if they don't have the values from 2018. What should we do? I think that question was already answered, but if you want to complement something, would be great.
Yeah. It is a huge challenge in many parts of the world that there are very little or non-existent or not very good data to calculate emissions on a city level. I think there are several resources out there from Global Covenant of Mayor, from ECLA, from CDP, and so on, where you can find some support on how to do it. I would say that if you don't have anything at all, why not take national emissions and divide by your population, take your share of the national emissions, and try and evaluate if that figure could be something that you could work with as a proxy for the time being.
Good. We are continuing here. So Stephanie Peters writes that We have now been listening to your demonstration regarding the 2030 mitigation target, but what about 2050? Do we use the same method for the longer term, or how do you work with that target?
Yeah, no, you don't. This method with a fair factor is simply used for the 2030 to invite more resourceful cities to take a deeper dive on the urgency matter and for a fairness equitable factor. The 2050 target is as it is, net zero. Where WWF emphasizes, of course, phasing out fossil fuels and enhancing ecosystems, and also bringing in good solutions that make increase the well-being of people and planet. Of course, then the next question is, of course, what is net zero, and that would be that is not defined. And it has, what I understand, has to be defined in the local context. But there is a huge discussion on what is net zero really, and that is for another webinar, I think, mainly. But here we stress that by basing your target in science, by being complete and open and transparent about your target, and coupling and adding on action, trustworthy action, you will have a credible net zero target, even though it's not exactly defined. But please define it for yourself or together with other cities in your country.
Maybe Saskia would like to mention something here, because you have actually been working with cities that are trying to set the targets well before 2050 to advance on faster, fairer, greener principle. Could you encourage us a bit here?
Well, I think it's what I also mentioned, that local leadership is necessary, and we need cities to go in front and showing leadership, not only with the 2030 targets, but also when they should be net zero. And this is not only inspirational for other cities, but also for other stakeholders in the city where these high or these ambitious targets are. And this is also very important, I think, for the transition. We always need to have those at the forefront, really fighting those battles, and for others to be able to follow. So really stressing that that's important in this. And we also seeing a lot of cities doing that. So we encourage you to continue on that path.
Yes, very important. Thank you. So another question here from German Ortiz. Good morning. In our case, we haven't calculated yet the emissions baseline for our city. Is there a guideline from you for doing that? Maybe this is a question for WWF, but Björn, what would you say first?
Yes, I think to my understanding, WWF is very much supporting the or pointing to all the resources. I think I mentioned that before, also all the resources that is available on international level and regional level from organizations like Global Covenant of Mayors, from the CDP, from ECLA, which have specific resources. I do understand that in some locations, the WWF also nationally will have some possibilities to support you in that work. Yeah.
Yes, that's also my the information I have. There are lots of resources out there for guiding cities to doing the emissions baseline and inventory. And we actually had this WWF webinar in the last round of the One Planet City Challenge, and we will share the link in the tutorial. But it's a very good question, and many of you are working exactly on that. And then there is another Spanish question from Matthias. El FAIR factor. Uri, please help me.
Yes, if the FAIR factor is the Gini index.
Sorry,
What?
if it was again?
If the FAIR factor is the Gini index, you know, this index that is measuring inequalities.
It's not an index, if that's the question. It's a FAIR factor is a result from a calculation. Could we say so, Björn?
Yeah, it's correct. We're using the Human Development Index from the United Nations Development Program, and it's a combined index which reflects economy, health, and education. And it then compares and relates all countries in the world on a scale from 0 to 1.
So the HDI is an index in itself, a global standard one, but the FAIR factor is more a word we use to describe parts of the OPCC method. I think correct, Björn?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And it gives you a well, it actually mostly points to that resourceful cities to take on a faster decrease of emissions and a tougher, more sharpened target.
Good. Uri, just shout out if we should clarify more. We have another Spanish question from Neida Cristancho Triana.
Yes, I think this was already answered because I was confused. So there is another question very similar from Matthias, and he was asking why are we using data from 2018 as a baseline year for doing these calculations?
Yes, maybe a quick repetition, Björn.
Yeah, absolutely. That is because the method is based on the IPCC special report on the 1.5 degree target from the year 2018, and the data and conclusions and so on in the report is for 2018, and therefore the method is based on 2018.
Good. Saskia, have you? Yes, please.
Yeah, just adding to that, I think what's important to understand there is that it was when we said, well, we need to halve emissions every decade, that was said in 2018. So when we say you need to halve globally by 2030, we need to have 2018 as the baseline year. So that's also when it comes to the numbers, we need to have that. That's like the baseline year also going forward. I hope that answers the question.
So we have still a few minutes. Great questions, by the way. Super active audience here. So Logan Callan asks, if a city's greenhouse gas reporting includes some scope 3 emission, for example, from composting, aviation, etc., should that be removed from the totals before performing the calculations?
Yeah, good question. This is the question on the next level, so to speak. Formally, the method for the 2030 emission target is the scope 1 and scope 2. But I think I know I don't know the official view on this from WWF, but of course it's better to include more things than less things in your target. But I think that you might want to, and I did this myself. I proposed for the city of Uppsala to have different kind of targets for different scopes. So we had one target for scope 1 plus 2, and then we had a target where we included long distance traveling with air flight to handle different possibilities when it comes to scope 1 and 2 emissions, whereas scope 3 emissions are a bit tougher to work on. So maybe you work with different targets, but please, I don't think it will hurt if you include scope 3 targets in a target calculated for scope 1 and 2.
Good. Final question. Maybe we have time, depending on Uri from German Ortiz.
Yes, I think it's more like a comment. He's saying that the Gini coefficient is a measure that allow us to make a quantification of the incomes inequality in a population, and it's calculated using the income distribution, and values are between 0 and 1, or 0 and 100 depending on the scale, and a value close to 0, it's a perfect equality, and a value close to 1 or 100, it's more inequality.
Right. I would say that this is a very good data or ground to work with when you plan your actions, your climate actions, to make the actions equitable and take that into consideration. So that is great.
Yes, concerning also what Björn just talked about, the target setting, we have a question from Probolingo in Indonesia. How do we calculate the emission reduction targets if we don't have baseline data in 2018? The baseline data we have is in 2022. So I think this is a general question for cities not having exactly the data that that the method requires. How should they think, and how can they still set targets with this method?
Right. Thank you for the question. Good observation. I think some cities might then have a previous another baseline or another emission inventory for maybe an even earlier target year. So let's say if you have 2 points, 2 years, make some average or try to make see how has the development of the emissions been doing over years, and try to back calculate a probably baseline for 2018. Try to maybe have a look at the national trajectory. How has the emissions the emissions of your city like the national trajectory, and can you make some kind of analog calculation to find out a probably level of emissions in 2018? So jiggle with the numbers to get started on target setting.
Thank you. And I could continue then because we have another question that is very good from Duong Shu here. Hello, everyone from Vietnam. How can mid-sized or smaller cities effectively apply the 1.5 alignment method in the One Planet City Challenge, especially when they lack the technical capacity or resources for detailed emissions forecasting? And this is, I think, a general question. If you are in the start of your climate journey, where to start, and so on, Björn, what would you say?
The good thing about the OPCC method is does not require forecasting of emissions. It requires a prognosis of your population in 2030. So as long as you have some kind of starting point for emissions in the year of 2018 or close by, the method will work. Then, of course, as the next step, you might like to work out the forecasting. But it's fine to have a target and start working with actions to try to get closer to the target.
And Björn, you were talking about the advantage of the OPCC method, but what do you think is most challenging and difficult in using the OPCC method?
I think we already heard this in the questions that that is to establish the baseline. There is a lack of data on city level in many parts of the world, so this is a challenge. I think the WWF has previously had I think maybe last year, a specific webinar on how to do an emission inventory and some tips there. Maybe we can have a link on that in the tutorials that you can have a specific look at. And so I think we could really deep dive into how to compile an emission inventory. It deserves a webinar of its own. I think also the challenge is that the different cities, I think it works for all kind of cities, small cities, medium cities, big, large cities. You might think that the Human Development Index value for your national is not showcasing the differences between cities in the country or region. So you might want to consider for that. We have some indication. We'll be doing some calculations on that, and we can see that it's not that much difference when it comes to total numbers. So the Human Development Index value for a country should work, I think.
But we have a link to some examples of subnational HDI data, which will also be posted in the tutorial. Great, interesting. Saskia, we have more questions, right?
Yes, we just got one from Tagum City. Thank you for your question. It says, can we have multiple reduction mid-targets and earlier net zero target? And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
If we take that first, Saskia, you can continue. I think Saskia also made that point in your presentation that if it's possible, please, you're so much welcome to put, of course, a net zero target much earlier than 2050. And I think that the WWF here can also add on that for certain regions like EU, for example, you expect cities to have a net zero target much earlier than 2050, maybe 2040. So if you have the possibility, yes, please do. And yes, the method points out the interim target year 2030 to get you started to really show that you are serious about decreasing emissions towards your path to net zero. But it's really recommended to, if you have the possibility, to add on interim targets for stepping stone targets for every 5 years up until your net zero target.
This
and
is
Saskia, there was,
super important. Saskia, maybe you can add something about why is it so valuable and important that cities move faster than 2050 net zero?
Yes, I think it's there are already cities that are doing that, and as I mentioned, it can have different reasons. What we see that the effect of that is that you inspire other cities, but you also inspire your own local environment. So the cities I've worked in, when working with the private sector or working with different parts of the city, it can be very beneficial to have targets that are more ambitious, because you also see that ripple effect on other actors around you that can say, well, the city really wants this, we want to contribute to that. And we also, that being said, being inspirational to others is one thing, but we also know that some cities need to go faster for others to follow. This is how transitions work. So we need some starters and some fast followers, and then the rest can follow in those footsteps. So I think it's crucial that some cities are going ahead and really setting those targets, and not only that, but really working with climate action.
Yes, the key messages now from WWF is faster, fairer, and greener. So we all need to move to net zero as fast as possible. Okay, I think we have a question also about, yes, the strategic feedback report. It's already replied in the chat, but we can bring it up, I think. So the strategic feedback report is shared with each of you who participate in the One Planet City Challenge. It's tailor-made based on the reporting you will do as a participant. To qualify as a participant, you will report to the CDP ICLEI track, where you present your climate work in a strategic way. And then you will receive a strategic feedback report. And as Andrea already pointed out in the chat, you are welcome to use your strategic report as you see fit. So you can share it and use it. And actually, Björn, I think one of the learnings you had from working in cities was that it was important to share and use the strategic feedback report to anchor it. Can you tell us a bit more about your experiences from working in cities with this?
Yes. Of course. First, I think that we learned that cities use the report in many different ways to fit into what they are working on, or they get an inspiration from the report that this is an area where we should focus more on. So they highlight that, not necessarily presenting the whole report to everybody. When it comes to the target verification and visualization, many cities have used it to highlight and alert and make the political level aware of the necessity to sharpen or even to adopt climate targets. So it has been elaborate, a tool to advocate for real good climate targets, and it is helpful. What I understand from what me myself working in the city, but also what I hear from colleagues, is that it's really helpful and appreciated the guidelines from the independent organizations like WWF, which helps the policy officers push for better targets to the political level.
Yes, so by joining the One Planet City Challenge, you can use it as a way to anchor these messages and to be part of the process to strengthen your targets and your action plan, of course, of your city. And I was actually going to ask a bit more about that, because today we are talking a lot about the technical aspects, like the method. But Björn, there is a broader context to anchor and to adopt an ambitious mitigation target. What is your tips regarding that, if you would like to say a bit more, because I think this is crucial for many of us here.
Yeah, I think, thank you for that question. I think this is the key point, that the method points out, and the global drive to push for net zero target, that is the necessary target to come to solve the climate crisis. But usually the political executive committee or the city council are used to work with targets, or feel competent working with targets that they themselves know that they can reach by their own actions. But here actually we are asking cities to adapt a target that is for the community, the society of the local city community. And so that is the first step, to feel comfortable putting out and giving the political level the narrative that this is for the community, and then the city administration will do their part. But the most important thing, and maybe challenging in some cases, but is the next step is then to present this target for the community and invite them to work with the city to fulfill the target. But I think that my experience after doing this is that it's very fruitful and maybe not the most powerful target for a city to work with, engaging stakeholders, engaging private sector, engaging citizens on your journey, climate journey, to this necessary climate target.
Mm. Yes.
And if I can add on what Björn is saying, I think there is something there with the community that is very important in this. We talk a lot about numbers, we talk a lot about cutting emissions, but I really want to highlight also that we all know that this is not only for the climate. I mean, this is also for the community. This is for the people in the city, having less consequences from climate change, really seeing that the city is doing something, but it also has effects on air quality, greenness in the city, people's lives. So we talk a lot about numbers, but I think we all know that this is really to make cities better and more safe and more comfortable to be in. So that should always be a part of the story here, and not only doing it because we need to or we should, but because we can create better cities doing this.
Thank you, Saskia, for this reminder. Very important. We are soon closing the Q&A. There are a bit of some questions, but we will reach out to you in the tutorial with the more tips and links, etc. But the final question to you, Björn, you have been working for many years with this. So we are all of us here on different stages. Some are in the start of their climate journey, some are more advanced cities. So what would be your final words, tips to the participants here today?
Well, for newcomers or early, if you're in your early climate journey stage, use the method. It's simple and it's easy to communicate. Get started, and then everything will follow. For cities who has been around for many years, working hard on climate change, then it's time to also start disaggregating targets, like adding on not only stepping stone targets for the net zero, but also looking into specific sectors. Many cities do they have take a fossil fuel free energy sector as a target. I think that many cities should have a look at methane. Specific if you have specifically if you have a large agriculture sector, or if you have some fossil fuel infrastructure and so on. Start looking at your sectors or subsectors, specific gases, and put targets on that to add on to the overall net zero and midterm target for 2030. Yeah.
Good. We are excited to work on this, Björn and Saskia. Thank you once again very much. And I would like, Björn, could you share the PowerPoint presentation again? Because now we will have a final message to you here. Once again, very interesting and good questions in the chat. So we are soon ending, but I would like once again to take the opportunity to welcome you all to join our global program and the One Planet City Challenge. By joining this initiative, you will have guidance to help you deliver on the Paris Agreement and build your city's resilience through integrated and ambitious climate action. But it also connects you with a thriving global community, which is actually this webinar and much more, where we have a strategic support program to you and which is intended to support your climate journey. So a warm welcome to join. And if you think this sounds interesting, and now you can go to the final slide, we are welcoming you to contact us. You are welcome to contact your national WWF office or email us. You can see the email address here. We have a web page, and we also have a YouTube channel, WWF Cities channel, where you will find this webinar posted and many other webinars. Specifically, I would like to tips you that there is a welcome webinar from March this year where we present the One Planet City Challenge. So I hope would be interested to look at that. But with this, we are coming to an end, and we wish you a good day and a good evening. And thank you very much for today, and hope to see you soon, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.